So I already mentioned a little bit of a background. So the title of this talk is Heroic Fatherhood. That's because Susie Flood put it in. It will go there a little bit. So I write all my talks in adoration, and if the Lord tells me to go a different direction, I go a different direction. So I'm not going to be beholden to that. We'll talk about fatherhood. We'll talk about heroic fatherhood. There's going to be a lot more to it, and I think hopefully it'll land with you guys. So I am the fourth of six children, born and raised in Davenport, Iowa, and I had a very classic 1980s, 1990s Catholic upbringing, which is to say we went to Mass on Sundays, we were sent to Catholic school, and we said our prayers before bed and before meals. There were no family rosaries, there was nothing, we never levitated at any point. It was very standard issue stuff. But it took, all six of my siblings, thanks be to God, are all in the church still, and it was a wonderful family, so I was very blessed to see a very solid upbringing. But I think, and so a lot of what I've seen with the culture is the solid upbringing I had, I'm not sure would be able to even do what it did for us today, just because of the way the world is today, how different the world is today than it was when I was growing up. I joke, I'm the last person to go to college without a cell phone in the history of the world. I don't know if there will ever be a person again who goes to college without a cell phone. I was the only person at Marquette University for a whole year that did not have a cell phone. It's just the way it was. And so that I grew up at this time kind of right before technology, while people going to church was it was on the decline, but they were still kind of holding on to it. And so, I have a lot of perspective on this, given my work with the church and with the radio show and all this other stuff. And also, I'm a student of it. I love to watch what's going on and see how we can fix it. And so, again, my wife and I are here in Des Moines, Iowa. We go to the Basilica of St. John and we homeschool our children because we like to be weird. That's what weird. But again, what you're going to hear today, the three things I really want to talk about come from basically three different either interviews I did specifically or series that I've been a part of, that I've done. And we'll kind of get into what it looks like with, I think we need to first set the stage. Anyone know who Monsignor James Shea is? You guys know that name out of University of Mary. So I had the opportunity to interview him a few years ago on the book that they wrote called From Christendom to Apostolic Mission. And I think he does an incredible job right off the bat of setting the stage of what does the world look like today? How is it different? We didn't even notice it happening. It happened under our feet. So we'll start with setting the stage on what the world looks like and what's against us, quite honestly, and how things have changed. And then from there we'll move into fatherhood. I did a series on heroic fatherhood, had an incredible opportunity to engage with some amazing people from across the country on fatherhood, and so I get some takeaways from that, and then finally we'll end with marriage. I'm currently just launching a series on heroic marriages, and so diving into what a good marriage looks like. And again, all these things work together, I think, when we're talking about vocations, about fostering vocations. All three of these things are going to play into that. And whenever I give a talk, especially on men's issues, there's a thing I thought of, I came to this idea pretty recently, and I think it's pertinent during an election season. We're going to hear the Democrats and Republicans arguing about all this stuff. They're going to argue about abortion, crime, education, finances for people, homelessness, the drug epidemic, all these things are going to be argued about on both sides. And my solution to all of this could be, I truly believe, if we fixed one problem, I had one solution that I could guarantee would fix all of these things. It would reduce the need for abortion. It would reduce the crime rates. It would reduce the terrible education systems that we have today. It would all the homelessness and the poverty. It would fix almost all of that. And the one thing I would change, the one thing I would do if I was president, God, I guess, is put fathers back in the home. Amen. If we can get fathers back in the home and we can fix the marriages, all this stuff goes away. We can stop yelling and screaming about it. There won't be a need to kill your child in the womb. There won't be a need to have bad schools. There won't be a need to, all this stuff will go away if we get fathers back. And so I'm convinced that is the call. And so every day I'm talking about the importance of fatherhood. I see it in my own life. I see it across the country. And we, as Serrans, understand the need for vocations. We understand the need for good parents. We understand the need for strong marriages to encourage those. That's where they're fostered, right? And so I'll get into a lot of that, but I think that framework for me is really important, that this idea that almost all the problems in the world can be alleviated if we just listen to God, if we just did what we're supposed to do. And that is, we heard it preached, probably last Sunday you heard it preached about two become one, marriage for life, and should not be split up. We should be following the tenets of what God gave us. It's amazing if we just do that. If we just do what God told us, how everything will kind of just go back. It might be hard. I mean, God never says it'll be easy, but it is amazing how well society works when we follow the tenets of God. So getting into this, the first thing I want to talk about is this talk I had with Monsignor Shea. Has anyone read the book From Christendom to Apostolic Mission? It is, so for those of you who haven't, it might be my number one recommended book, period. Anyone, I mean, you guys am I wrong on that? People who have read it. I mean, it is, I have listeners to my show who are not Catholic, and they have called me and said, I bought this book, I have now bought multiple copies of this book, and I'm sharing it in my Protestant church. It's that good. It's only like 100 pages. It is a tour de force explaining what has happened in society over the last 100 years. So again, the book is called From Christendom to Apostolic Mission. I'm going to, I know people love me sitting up here quoting, but I think, again, Monsignor Shea is smarter than I am, so you'll be okay with it. A couple quotes I'm going to start off with. We are dealing with the first culture in history that was once deeply Christian, but that by a slow and thorough process has been consciously ridding itself of its Christian basis. So in the history of the world, we're the first culture that was Christian and is no longer Christian. It happened slowly, and we didn't even notice it. But I think that's the context he's making, is that we had a Christian culture, and now it's gone. Okay, now that there's hope here. But we have to understand what the landscape is. In 1974, Archbishop Fulton Sheen said in a conference, "We are at the end of Christendom. Not of Christianity, not of the church, but of Christendom." Now, what is meant by Christendom? Christendom is an economic, political, social life as inspired by Christian principles. That is ending, and we have seen it die. This is 1974, Archbishop Sheen. But he went on to say, these are great and wonderful days in which to be alive. It is not a gloomy picture. It is a picture of the church in the midst of an increasing opposition from the world. And therefore, live your lives in full consciousness of this hour of testing and rally close to the heart of Christ. We have to understand where we are. We are in a post-Christian society. We no longer live in a world that is, everything is guided by Christian principles. We have, the devil's working against us to change that. And so we, as parents, as grandparents, as aunts, uncles, as Serras, have to understand that. We have to be more on guard. There are two modes in which Christianity intersects with human societies. We talked about the Christendom mode. So this is what we had for centuries. The culture's imaginative vision and narrative is provided by Christianity. So you think of the 1600s. All art, all music, all philosophy, everything was guided by the Christian principles. Everything was. You couldn't get away from it. An apostolic mode, the church's imaginative vision and narrative goes directly against the culture. That's where we are now. What we believe, when we say that marriage is for a man and a woman, when we say that abortion is wrong and life begins in conception, when we say all these things, we are told that we are wrong by mainstream culture. So now we are going against the culture. Okay? And so we have to rethink priestly life and education in light of this current context. So seminarians today, the priests can no longer, so seminaries in general and the priests can no longer go about as lone rangers in enemy-held territory. They need brothers in arms. They need an apostolic structure of life. And the entire life is animated by the Christian vision, which is why the Serra Club can help us support that. Okay? Our priests more than ever need our help. The world has shifted so much in the last 50 to 70 years. They have an analogy of a river. I think this is, I like pictures. This makes sense to me. If you put your child, so society is this river going down. And it used to be Christian. And so if you just sent your kids to public school, if you just went to church you didn't do every Sunday, hopefully you go every Sunday. But because everything was Christian, you could be pretty safe bet that your kids are going to be Christian too. Because everyone they knew was Christian. Everything they did was Christian. And so you could go down this river and kind of just go with the flow, and it was really easy. We no longer live in that time. The river going this way, if you throw your kids into it, is hedonism. It just is. So now we have to go up. We have to go against the river. G.K. Chesterton famously said that a dead thing can go with the stream, but only a living thing can go against it. We are called to go against it. We have to go against it. And so we as Catholics today have to be more on guard, more ardently fighting against the stream. So summary of the first part. I hopefully set the stage that, it's a little doom and gloom, but this idea of the apostolic mission. For the first 400 years of Christianity, it was an illegal superstition, punishable by death. First 400 years. It grew every year at like 1 to 400% in popularity. Our numbers grew. It was an illegal superstition. Could not do it. Or you'd be dead. How many of the first popes died by murder? You guys, what's the number? Anyone, Father, you know what it is? It's like, I don't know, how many? 60, 70, 80, they all died. They were all killed. They knew, some of their pontificates lasted days, right? But they knew going into this what they signed up for. That's an apostolic mission. That's people who know what the culture's against them, very, very against them, and they still did it, right? They still knew what was right and they did it. Thank God we don't live in that culture, but we do live in a time, and I think Bishop Sheen's quote is apt, that there's opportunity for us. There's opportunity. I'm going to continue to go back to the thing I said at the beginning about the priests we need to save the church. Those types of priests can help save the church. I am convinced that, I talked to my mom, who's kind of doom and gloom about all this. I go, Mom, when this is all done, in 50 years, the strength of the Catholic Church, these priests are so awesome. They're so great. They're going to save the church. It's going to happen. Now we'll be smaller, we'll contract, and then when we're the only sane group of people left in the whole world, we'll grow again, okay? All right, so first point, I do like recommending books. I'm a guy who I graduated Marquette and never actually read a book until I was 7. It's not a great, feather in the cap of Marquette, but now I'm reading all the time, and I think it's a really good question to ask someone is, what book would you recommend? I think that helps to set the stage, to give somebody an opportunity to tell you, hey, here's not just 5 seconds of advice, but here's a really good, well thought out book. So first thing is from Christendom to Apostolic Mission. Get it, read it, share it with your friends. I had bought probably 3 or 4 copies and given them all away. I wish I could keep one of them. One of them I had all my notes in too. I can't find it. Somebody else knows. I know. I just come up with all these myself. Okay, that sets the stage for where we're at. I did a series last year called the Heroic Fatherhood series. And by the way, my show is Man Up. It's a podcast. If you want to look it up, go for it. It's got 8 years of content. So you can just go back to the Wayback Machine, listen to the first episode with Bishop Connolly. I've had him on a few times. He's great guy. But during this Heroic Fatherhood series, I had the opportunity to interview a wide variety of people. People here in town who I look up to as fathers, people who had great fathers. I interviewed my own father, which is an emotional, but fun thing for me to do. But I also the opportunity to interview Cardinal Dolan, Father Larry Richards, Deacon Harold Brooks-Sivers, Dr. John Bishop, and Dr. Ray Garendi. And so the story with Cardinal Dolan is actually really cool. I'll share a little bit about it. Do you know Father Bob Busher at all? Davenport? Okay, so Father Bob was at my wedding. Father Bob's one of my best friends. I saw Father Bob 3 weeks ago. Father Bob's now in hospice. He's best friends with Cardinal Dolan. I thought he's making this up. They're not best friends. Like, he kept it forever. I mean, I've known the guy forever. And he's, Timmy's my best friend. I'm like, okay, you're blowing smoke. He can't possibly be best friend. Well, then I read Cardinal Dolan's biography, and in it, there's like a whole couple chapters on his best friend, Father Bob Busher. Okay, you weren't lying. Okay. I mean, maybe you are best friends. So this is cool. It stays in this room. Don't tell anyone. Yesterday, in prepping for this, I re-listened to a few of the interviews. So I re-listened to the Kevin Wells interview. I'm going to re-listen to the interview I did with Cardinal Dolan, just so I can make sure that I had the salient points correct. And I get done listening to them. Yesterday, this was like 11:30. I'm going to lunch. And as soon as I park, I pull my phone and flip my text. I have a text from my mother-in-law with Cardinal Dolan and Father Bob Busher yesterday in his hospital room in Davenport, Iowa. He had flown there, told no one. One person knew, and he snuck in to Davenport, Iowa yesterday. So anyway, Cardinal Dolan's an incredible man, to do that. And I was pretty emotional yesterday because I'm going through this. I'm listening to this interview I did with him. And then as soon as I'm done, there's a picture of Cardinal Dolan in this room that I was in 3 weeks ago in Davenport, Iowa with Father Bob Bishop. So, the Cardinal Dolan interview, it's a joy to interview that guy, but he had some really great points that I think are apt for us to talk about fatherhood. The goal of this series was to have people reflect on their own fathers. What were kind of these common themes that people had throughout their upbringing that made them the people that were today? These are solid Catholic men, whether they were the priests or deacons, or good men. What were these things that and I think for me, the underlying theme was the constancy of the father. Very few of the fathers that I was interviewing about were theologians. Very few of them were, these people that were going to be in seminary and were close to priesthood, and they didn't, and they were living basically like quasi-priests as fathers. Most of them were not that. I think Cardinal Dolan's words, my dad was not a Shiite Catholic. He wasn't a Shiite Catholic. He was a meat and potatoes Catholic, those are his words. He said, he couldn't tell you why we believed what we believed, but he just believed it. He went to church every Sunday, and he goes, and it was this example of watching him when he saw the Eucharist getting on his knees. It was the example of just the respect and reverence he had for the priest. It was the example he had of just being involved in parish life. He told us a great story of these, at the time he was in the high school seminary, Cardinal Dolan was, and his dad's sitting there driving a tractor, and these guys come up to Jehovah's Witnesses, and they're asking him, do you believe in Christ? He goes, I do. He goes, well, you want to talk about that? He goes, yeah, let's grab some beers. He was like, well, these guys aren't going to drink beers. But Cardinal Dolan was saying, didn't stop my dad from having one. And he goes, they're asking him, he says, Dad, I don't know any of these answers, but this guy's in seminary, he'll tell you everything. And so his point is, his dad didn't need all the tools to tell you why he believed what he believed. He just believed it. And there were many, so there's another story. You guys all know Caitlin Clark, right? Everyone loves Caitlin Clark, right? Des Moines, Iowa, okay? That's her parish, you guys are at Mass at. So Caitlin, that's where she grew up. So her brother I've got to know, and you guys are going to hear from Addie Croker later today, who does Freedom. There's a program we have here. I met him as I was a mentor in Freedom for a couple of years. So I got to meet a lot of these cool high school kids. And so Blake, I know from 2018 probably at this point, when he was just a kid, And then he goes to college, and now he's an Freedom mentor. So I had him on the show. He's like one of the first people that was a high school student, and now he's a mentor. It's really cool. And so I had him on the show, and part of my conversation with him is same kind of thing. Hey, what did your parents do? Because Caitlin seems like she's got her stuff figured out. You've got your stuff figured out, and you guys are busier than all heck. What'd you do? He goes, we just had the constancy of the faith. We went to Catholic school. We prayed every night. We never missed Mass on Sunday, ever. He goes, and we were traveling, as you can imagine. He played D1 football, he played at Iowa State, Caitlin's Caitlin, but they never missed Mass. Whether they were wearing their jerseys and they had to go somewhere, but even when they traveled, they never missed Mass. He goes, that always stuck with me, right? So this constancy of the Catholic faith, the constancy, and I would argue today, because of what I said in the first part, we have to be more judicious than ever in fighting against that, right? So we have to be more judicious than ever. We cannot let our guard down for a minute. If Blake said, yeah, every once in a while we'd have just on Sundays it was just tough, Caitlin had games here and I had games here. We just kick the can down the road. We don't need to do it. They didn't do that. I think that's that constancy is really important. And I heard that over and over again. The other one was from a guy by the name of Dr. John Bishop. So John Bishop is a guy here in town, and I interviewed him. He is I'm just going to do 1,000 resources today. I'm glad I did the first talk while you guys still have room left in your notepads. He has started. He was at Focus in so everyone knows Focus right out of Denver. And he was pretty high up there with Curtis Martin. He was right here, and so he was just his right-hand man. But he was this young guy, the doctorate. He was putting together a lot of their programs. He was putting a lot of their material that to give to their students. And so he has started a new organization. He moved back to Des Moines, where his family lives, and it's called Forge. So you can go to www.myforge.org. It is to reclaim the family. So everything I'm talking about here is to reclaim the family, and he does it through the eyes of the Father. So save the Father, save the family, save society is kind of the model of it. And he has, it's because of his background with Focus, the content is 10 out of 10, unbelievable. So if you're looking for men's group stuff, myforge.org. If you want to send it to other people, myforge.org. Really good stuff. John Bishop, when I had him on, the word that, and I started both series, my marriage series and my heroic fatherhood series with him. He talked about the idea of intentionality in parenting, specifically in our fatherhood, but this works for both. you have to be intentional as a father. And I would say as a grandfather too, especially as a father, because I think it's probably easier as a grandfather to be intentional because you actually enjoy it sometimes. I'm just coming off, I think the kids didn't sleep like 10 o'clock last night, they woke up at 5 this morning, so I know what it's like. But to be intentional as a father, to set a plan of life, to say, how am I going to raise these kids? What's my plan when things start going awry? But to be intentional, to make sure you're setting aside. People ask me about date nights with the kids. We try to do date nights with the kids. They try to. It doesn't happen as frequently as we would like. But when you have a big family, if you're not intentional, you'll never have one-on-one time. And so it's just something my wife and I have been very, very diligent about. I wouldn't say we're good about it, but diligent about trying to do one-on-one time with each of the kids. Okay. But this idea of intentionality as parents and understanding the importance, it is the most important thing that you'll do in your life is to be a parent, right? To raise up these kids that God has entrusted you with. And so that was, when I thought of the Heroic Fatherhood series and I put it all together, it was about intentionality and constancy. Father has to do both of those things. And now we're moving on to the series called Heroic Marriages. I just started this a couple weeks ago, and so it's fresh in my mind. And I think it's going to be very good. The 1962 exhortation before marriage. Anyone know this? Anyone heard of this? Any of the priests? Father Larry, remember this one? 1962 exhortation before marriage. All right, so this used to be read, apparently, so I've been told. Father Ricardo said this, so I trust him. That they would oftentimes read this as the homily before the actual marriage ceremony, before the actual sacrament of the marriage, where they're doing the vows. And I think it's one of the most beautiful, it's incredible. The wisdom of the church in this document is incredible. And so, again, next recommendation, 1962, exhortation before marriage. It's like 2 pages. You could read it pretty quickly. But there's so much gold in there. I'm going to just highlight a few of these things. So we understand, phase 1, what we're against in the culture. Phase 2 is reclaiming fatherhood, and I'd say step 3 now is reclaiming marriage. If we can do these things, we can be that light on the hill. We can keep society going while everything else crumbles. We can raise up these great priests. But on the marriage side of this, obviously Satan loves to attack marriage. He loves to attack fatherhood. This is from the 1962 exhortation. But Christ our Lord added to the holiness of marriage an even deeper meaning and a higher beauty. He referred to the love of marriage to describe his own love for his church. That is, for the people of God whom he redeemed by his own blood. And so he gave to Christians a new vision of what marriage ought to be. Here it is. A life of self-sacrificing love like his own. Man, I never heard that on the altar. I mean, no offense to Father Larry, you didn't preach that. He actually did preach at my wedding. But the idea of self-sacrificing love is it. I was much more concerned with the party, I think, at this point. I was not a theologian at all. I didn't have a radio show back then. I was a bad husband. But this idea of self-sacrificing love is why I'm getting into marriage. That was not something, I don't think most young people have any idea about, hey, you have to be willing to die for this person. Hi, welcome to marriage. And this document goes more into this, right? I think we all see this, though. I mean, I saw it especially my grandparents. I mean, hopefully I don't get too choked up over this. But my grandfather lived to 100, an incredible man. So I did a couple shows with my grandparents. I was blessed beyond belief with some of these people in my life. And his wife went through dementia starting it was probably the last 8 years of his life and her life. And it was horrific. And he was just the most patient. You saw it. I mean, in those experiences, and you see an elderly man in his 90s, the patience he dealt with, to have the same questions asked him all day long, every day. It's just every day of his life, and he just loved her. He just loved her. That is self-sacrificing love. That's what we're called to. We're called to, if your spouse is in a wheelchair. My uncle, his wife was diagnosed with MS at about age 27, back in the 70s. So she's been in the wheelchair for a long time. To watch the self-sacrificing love, that's what you're signing up for. I tell high schoolers all the time, you think it's all going to be just sunshine and rainbows. It's not. It's self-sacrificing love. You have to love this person so much that you will die for them. And the Catholic Church was very explicit about that in this document. I'll keep going. Henceforth, you will belong entirely to each other. You will be one in mind, one in heart, and one in affections. Think of that. You have to be one in mind, one in heart, one in affection. How many people live, separate bank accounts, separate lives, separate whatever. Oh, we're married. No, one. Everything's together. And whatever sacrifices that you may hereafter be required to make to preserve this mutual life, always make them generously. Here is the best part of the whole thing. Sacrifice is usually difficult and irksome. Only love can make it easy, and perfect love can make it a joy. Okay? If we have true, perfect love, serving someone you love, can be a joy. That's how the church is teaching on marriage. That's what we need to reclaim. We need to reclaim that. People get difficulties in marriage and they give up, they quit. No. We need to get so dialed into our marriages that it's a joy to serve the other person. That's the Catholic Church's view on marriage. Okay. Man, I think there's a crowd. Here we go. Bishop James Connolly, on his first letter, when he's becoming a bishop, he wrote a letter. And it was called Sacrifice is the Language of Love. And he goes deep, it's a lot about marriage and a lot about sex and contraception. But this idea that sacrifice is the language of love, I think is really important for us to realize in the context of marriage. We who are in the vocation of married life are called to foster holy marriages. Okay, ones built on self-sacrifice and the cultivation of Christian virtues. In a world that's increasingly anti-Christian, which we've talked about and we've seen, it needs people who are on mission. And this is our way of evangelization. Creating families who do not go with the world, but joyfully go against it. And that's what the marriages in today's world need to be. So in conclusion, there's another couple of quotes from Christendom to Apostolic Mission that I want to share, and some ideas. That in the Christian vision, to be a human is to be involved in an extraordinary adventure. Let me repeat that. In the Christian vision, to be human is to be involved in an extraordinary adventure. We are all called in our own way to live this adventure. By doing so, we can change the world around us. First in our homes, then in our parishes, then in our communities, then in the world. Right? We start in the home, this idea of subsidiarity, this idea that we can go as close to our kids and our family and work it out from there. Our adherence to living as people who are on apostolic mission, whether as fathers, as mothers, as husbands, as brothers, as single people, as priests, as religious, if we're doing this joyfully, if we're doing it the way we're called to do it, if we're doing it heroically, that will inspire those around us. And that's how we're going to change the world. That's how we have to change the world. That's how we're going to inspire the next generation of priests and religious, is by living this authentic, joyful Christianity. G.K. Chesterton said, "The Christian ideal has not been The Christian ideal has not been tried and found wanting. Rather, it has been found difficult and left untried." I agree 100%. Christian ideal has not been tried. It has not been. We aren't giving it fully. And I think today, and he wrote that in obviously well before the 1960s. Today, how much more we need to live to this Christian ideal because of everything that's happening around us. As Bishop Barron likes to say, no one is inspired by milquetoast or beige Catholicism. We need to live lives of greatness, of heroic virtue. Father Reed Flood, one of my favorite priests of the diocese here. I have many favorite priests of the diocese. You'll hear that. I have 1,000 favorite priests of the diocese. Father Reed Flood is, so if you guys know Susie Flood, it's her son, who's just this incredible man. He was linebacker, homecoming king. He was wrestling, state wrestler, captain of the football team, all the things. Just an incredible guy. Very bright man as well. And Father Reed, I've had many great conversations with him, some spiritual direction with him. When you ask about his vocation, why did you want to become a priest? He said, I always knew I wanted to do something epic in my life, which is, if you know Father Reed, him saying something epic is like classic Father Reed. But he saw the vision of the priesthood as an epic adventure, which it is. It should be. Like, that is exactly what it should be. You're going into enemy territory. It's like a battle. Like, you are literally on a battlefield. And you are the guy leading people into the army, you're leading people into the field, And you're like giving the Eucharist and helping them all along the way. It's the whole thing, right? So a priest's life is this epic life. And we have to understand as Christians that more so than ever we need people like Father Reed. We need these people who understand, I'm going to carry this flag into battle. Like that's what we're in. I'm going to end with a word from Scripture, which is probably the best way to do it. I mean, Matthew is probably better than I am at things. This was our reading at our wedding. And my wife and I are much better Christians today than we were then. We're just like, she's always been a wonderful woman, but she's always like, we're both like, man, we're way more on fire for faith now. Like, I definitely would die for the faith. I think I would at 24. I'm not sure if I would. But so we reread our readings from our wedding every anniversary. And so this one is obviously means a lot to me, but I think it is the mantra. It is what we need to be as people who are on an apostolic mission, people who are going against the current. You are the light of the world. A city built on a hill cannot be hidden. No one, after lighting a lamp, puts it under a bushel basket, but on the lampstand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven. We are all called to be the light of the world. We're called to be that city on the hill. And by doing what we're called to do, we will be that light and bring others to Jesus. Thank you for your time.